All right.
Eric, I have a question before
Yep,
you.
please do.
Where do I find where the exam venues are in each state for the final exam? I know I'm a bit ahead of myself, but we were just talking about it in our group.
I think you will get informed. And I think if you're quite a distance from the main campus, that there will be somewhere nearby. And when that time comes, it'll be pushed out from as to where the exams are, what they're going to do. And at that point, if you're an hour or whatever, is where you communicate with whoever that sends that email to say, all right, I'm an hour and a half away. Where can I do my exam, please?
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'd be at the Brisbane campus anyway.
Yeah, okay. How close are you to the Brisbane campus?
About 50 minutes. So
Okay,
well, yeah.
I think you've got to be an hour and a half away to warrant a non-campus based exam. So I think you might be within that limit.
Yeah, it would be. That's cool. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so how do we get on, everybody? What kind of steps did you take? Well, I think we both had good discussions on the steps you take in trying to analyze what it is you are meant to do. But anybody come up with an idea of how you might start approaching this particular question then?
I think that it was a discussion that we had with you, Eric, particularly in a 500-word essay. I think my head's still in lab report mode. I don't know, because that's the only thing I've written for this university thing. The quotes are okay, and in this situation, I would probably find out, okay, with the definitions, I'd get a quote and write it the hypothetical situation, whatever it is, I'd create that and then try and answer the questions that way, I suppose, and break down those steps using my example. I think once that's written, I would find it a bit easier to be able to get my head around what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with quoting and then using your examples as a way of evidencing you actually know what the quote means. There's nothing wrong with that at all. There's lots of different ways you can demonstrate to the reader that you know what you're talking about. In this particular instance, though, how would you start? What kind of things might you talk about in the first instance? So, Wells, I think you're spot on there, Sarah, what you're saying. What do people think about how you might actually start this process? Would you start right at the null hypothesis?
No.
There's a mixture between yes, I would, I have no clue what you're talking about, and no, I wouldn't. So, and everything in between.
I think, sorry.
Or perhaps with the experiment itself, the hypothetical experiment.
Yeah, you could start off with that one. And then you could sort of draw out the issues from that hypothetical experiment. Yep. And this might be a little bit of an unfair question because it's expecting you to know what a null hypothesis is, something to do with the fact that we've covered it a few times in the classes, but then that's okay. That was a few weeks ago, so. But no, the reason I'm asking is this, is that in fact, a null hypothesis is probably a little bit hard to explain if you don't know what a hypothesis is. So actually, when you look at this, you might find it's much easier for me to explain what a null hypothesis is if I start off saying a hypothesis is this, and the null hypothesis is that. Because now you're sort of demonstrating what it is compared to something else. So it's much easier sometimes to explain what something is when you're comparing it to something else. And in this case, because you're looking at the null hypothesis, which is part of that bigger hypothesis kind of notion, it might be easier to start off this one with a short sentence saying, a hypothesis is this, it can be falsified, a null hypothesis is this kind of thing. Does that make sense? And it can take away the confusion of saying, well, how do I describe what a null hypothesis is? So the reason I'm saying it is because sometimes when you analyze these things, you've got a bit of a feel what's expected, taking a bit of a step back saying, okay, what's the easiest way for me to get to this point? Might actually mean, in this instance, maybe I start off with saying, the hypothesis is this, And that's much easier for me now to explain what a null hypothesis is, and therefore to go into the rest of the kind of description, discussion, etc. But of course, the trick then is you've got to work out how to do that in a very, in a succinct manner. Does that make sense? It's just an idea. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's just an idea of how sometimes taking a bit of a step back, contextualizing something, makes the rest of it flow much easier than trying to get straight into something and then trying to explain something, and you're trying to explain it without the kind of, the background to it. Any other thoughts or questions? Does all that make?
Probably thousands.
Yeah. We don't have time for 1,000. We've got time for a couple.
Clear.
All right. Well, you're more than welcome to ask me questions in the next few weeks. But if there's no more questions now that you'd like to cover right now, we are getting towards the end anyway. It means we're sort of finishing on time rather than late. Is that all right? Excellent. Sorry for locking you out, everybody, but I'm glad to see you back online again and waited for me. And I'll see you all next week. Have a good evening.
Eric. Bye.
All right.
Thanks, Eric. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.